Story 1. There are restaurants and social clubs hidden in plain sight that the general public has no idea even exist. They do not advertise themselves. The only way you would know is if someone with money brought you there, as I was. Story 2. Doctors on call. I have several clients worth between $20 and $50 million, and all of them pay a premium price for a doctor on call anytime during the day. At 3:30 in the morning, if your foot hurts, the doctor answers. If you need a prescription urgently in the middle of the day, the doctor fills it. Need an appointment first thing in the morning or at the last minute, the doctor makes room. The level of healthcare provided to those with unlimited money is both amazing and shocking. Story 3. Their homes are owned by trusts and often operated by limited liability companies. It is very easy to do and establishes a legal barrier between your property and yourself. Story 4. When their children go to college, very wealthy people will buy them a condominium rather than put them in a dormitory. This is especially true in highly populated or university-dense locations like Boston or New York City. Then at graduation, they will sell the condominium, and the profit from 4 years of appreciation will pay for a significant portion of tuition. Story 5. I knew a family that went on trips to exotic locations several times a year. They all traveled first class on different airplanes. In case something happened, it would not greatly impact their business holdings. Story 6. I have read that wealthy people talk to each other about money in a way that middle-class people do not. The wealthy educate each other about better money management and tax benefits. Many people in the middle class were raised to believe such discussions are inappropriate. Story 7. With the exception of perhaps a few wealthy celebrities, almost none of them consider themselves rich. They all look up to someone else who is even wealthier as an example of true wealth. Story 8. Weekly deliveries of fresh flowers. Those large floral displays that five-star hotels have in their lobbies are similar to the displays wealthy individuals have in the foyer of their homes, with new arrangements delivered every week or so. Additionally, flowers are provided for the rest of the house. This can easily cost $2,000 a week. Additional deliveries are often made for winter and summer homes. Story 9. With the exception of celebrities, they do not use social media and maintain a strict sense of privacy. Wealthy people do not use Facebook. You do not have to be wealthy to do that, but many people do not understand the value of privacy. There is an old saying that bears repeating. There is only one thing better than being wealthy and famous: being wealthy. Story 10. They socialize much more than the average person would think. Usual people do not have enough time or will for it after a long day at work. Story 11. My son's friend's grandfather was very wealthy. His friend said he would often just say, "Let's go to Hawaii," or wherever, and they would all hop on his private jet and go for a few days. This man was incredible. He donated heavily to worthy causes. When he died, his home and estate sat empty. His cleaning lady was given a house on the grounds to live in permanently. She maintained the large house. There was also a groundskeeper who took care of the landscape. The estate covers just under 200 acres in a wealthy area along a river. A trust had been set up to fund the property for over 100 years. My son's friend asked if he could live there. So now he lives in this enormous old house. It had been the grandfather's childhood home, which he had disassembled and moved to this new location. The place is remarkable. The grandfather had no college education, but he came from a wealthy, well-connected family. His father served as the United States ambassador to Ireland, Poland, and Belgium under President Franklin D. Roosevelt. He and his friend invented the first central electrocardiographic system. They made millions from this and many other valuable medical technologies. Story 12. All those special perks at Walt Disney World. Hidden doors lead to secret hallways away from the public. Hidden rooms and special amenities ensure they never have to wait for anything. Story 13. I worked at a place where the chief executive officer would sometimes not show up to the office, so we just chatted with his bodyguard because he had nothing to do. So, yes, there was a bodyguard at the office in case the chief executive officer wanted to show up. Whenever the chief executive officer appeared, he had security everywhere. This was strange because I have seen other chief executive officers and founders in Silicon Valley, and they did not have much of a security presence. Only after working at the company and realizing how disgusting, toxic, and despicable the place was did I finally understand why he needed security. Story 14. I provided security through a third party for a group of wealthy individuals who drove Alfa Romeos that were raced and signed by Enzo Ferrari. These were only these ancient race cars. They chose a beautiful area to drive them and had them shipped from all over the world. At that time, it was in Glacier Waterton National Parks, with the vehicles and most owners staying at the Prince of Wales Hotel. To clarify, I was not security for the wealthy people themselves. I was there to guard their vehicles. There were many wealthy older men with women who looked like their daughters. I upset one of them by asking if it was some kind of father-daughter event. They had personal specialist mechanics following them and working on these vehicles. It was an elaborate operation. They flew the cars from country to country and kept them in storage when not in use. Story 15. My parents have my great-grandparents' silver bell for calling in the service from their dining room. My grandfather had a Matisse just sitting in storage somewhere. Story 16. Vacations are not just for fun. They also meet with other wealthy families they have befriended during their annual luxury resort visit. Story 17. They have an annual membership to America's Cheese Caves, and they hoard all the good craft singles for themselves. Story 18. I work on super yachts. I cannot name any because of non-disclosure agreements. This is what happens when the boss wants to go for lunch at their friend's villa. A helicopter picks them up from their mansion, lands on the helideck. The yacht moves a couple of 100 yards offshore from the coastal villa. The helicopter goes from the helideck to the villa and drops the boss off, then goes to pick up after dinner. Everything happens in reverse to return the boss back to the mansion. This easily costs about $120,000 in fuel, crew expenditures, and other expenses for lunch. This is nothing to them when a boat like this costs about $15 million a year to maintain. All for personal pleasure and a place to hide. You do not know what money is until you have seen all this stuff firsthand. Story 19. They pretend to be normal, that is, they do not wear their brands on their clothes and they do not brag about their fortune. They find it easier to go through life this way, pretending to be the average person when they are secretly very wealthy. Story 20. Outsource everything. Hire someone who specializes in the task, never a jack of all trades. Wealthy people are not good with money. They hire experts to manage theirs. They are not inherently tidier. They hire cleaning services. They do not file their own taxes. They use accountants. They do not do their own shopping or styling. They hire personal shoppers and stylists. They do not pick and purchase their own furniture or decor. They hire designers. They do not manage their own schedules. They have assistants. Need branding, marketing, legal help, or strategy. Hire specialists. Time is the most valuable asset, and outsourcing lets you buy more of it. Story 21. This may seem small and unimportant, but it has stayed with me. Someone who was a personal assistant to an ultra-wealthy person described how part of their duties was stocking their boss's personal bathroom. Their boss used a new full-size bar of soap for washing their hands and then discarded that full-size only used once bar. I would say they are grotesquely wasteful on levels that ordinary people cannot fathom. Story 22. A lot of people pay for companionship not on a sexual level, but they pay others to pretend to be friends with them. I have known a couple of people who have been involved in this, taking money to be a short-term companion, going out to a meal or a movie or something completely mundane. I guess when you are ultra-wealthy, the type of friends you keep are not the kind who do things like go to the movies together. Story 23. I had a job right after college as an assistant for a construction company. Some of their projects were in a very wealthy neighborhood. It was shocking to see rooms full of clearly unused items. For example, one wealthy family had a home theater that was like a 50% scale actual movie theater and a room full of unopened DVDs still in their packaging. This was in the early 2000s. Story 24. I grew up poor. I am now lower upper class with a $600,000 household income and no many decamillionaires. I graduated from a top 5 MBA program and work in finance. What I think would surprise people is how U-shaped many things are. By that, I mean the lower class and upper class act more similarly than the middle class. The upper and lower classes are very uncensored and will give their true, often offensive, opinions about race, politics, and other topics, both in private and on social media. The middle and upper middle classes, especially, are very censored because they worry about their careers and social status in ways the poor and rich do not. The rich, of course, have better grammar, spelling, and arguments. Story 25. My wife just told me that as a child, her grandparents would take their family to St. Thomas each year. One of the days, they would take their boat to St. John for shopping. She did not realize that was something only wealthy kids did until she was in her 30s. Story 26. Replacing sheets constantly. I met someone a few years ago with old family wealth, and hearing some of the things her family had a budget for that was bigger than my family's income was incredible. One of these things was $70,000 per year on bedding because they replaced it after use. They genuinely thought that using sheets for longer than a week was disgusting, and washing them was not an option. I asked them if they rewore clothes or not and saw the wheels turn in their head as if it made them realize how silly it was to think sheets were gross after a week but clothes were perfectly washable. They do not even donate the sheets, which makes it even more wasteful. These are people who have several staff who would have washed the sheets daily if asked. Story 27. To summarize, their life is based on using and gaining money. So every day is a business day to them even though they are not working. This is mostly because they need to stay on the move. Story 28. Really rich gated or private communities exist in lesser-known states like Montana. Many high-ranking government and agency officials retire in that region. The exclusivity can be extreme, with some communities requiring recommendations from other wealthy residents before purchasing a very expensive home. Some of these areas are gated entire towns rather than typical suburbs. For example, a well-known winter house located at 6 Aurora Borealis Way, Big Sky, Montana 59720, is part of a private community called the Yellowstone Club. These winter vacation homes are usually smaller residences for very wealthy individuals, illustrating the varying levels of exclusivity. Additionally, the mansions in New England are among the most impressive in the country, surpassing those in Los Angeles or New York City. The region features hyper-wealthy, old money estates. Story 29. Lombard loans. The summary is that you borrow money against your assets because the cost of being out of the market is greater than the cost of selling everything down to cash. If you borrow $15 million against your $35 million portfolio and the portfolio goes up by 5%, you make $1.75 million. If you borrow at 4%, that loan costs you $0.6 million in interest only. Congratulations, you are now $150,000 better off, plus whatever you needed the money for. If you sell $15 million of assets, your $20 million portfolio goes up 5%, you make $1 million. Now you have to rebuild it back up to $35 million. Remember, time in the market is greater than timing the market. Story 30. Their kitchen is for display only. They still cook on their own but do so in a separate kitchen tucked away from view. The display kitchen typically has high-end appliances like a Miele-branded oven range, but it is never used. The countertops are made from imported material that no one is allowed to place items on. They also have separate cars for different duties. I recall one family friend bought an Audi Q7, and its sole purpose was to drop their kids off at school. It was the lower-end vehicle in their fleet. They had one vehicle to commute to work in and another for grocery shopping. Story 31. They have personal bankers who handle every expense their household incurs. I once knew a woman going through a divorce. The estate was about $9 million. After the divorce, she told me that her portion of the money seemed to be disappearing quickly and asked for ways to economize. I had noticed they had Comcast Fiber and AT&T DSL going into their house, so I asked why she had both services and how much they cost per month. She said she had no idea. I asked how that was possible, and she said the bank managed all of it. It turned out a single person at the bank handled every monthly bill and provided her a quarterly statement with just one figure on it. It's hard to believe, but I think many people probably live like this, though I do not. Story 32. Picking up my daughter 200 miles away because it is raining and she does not want to drive back. In a private Airbus A340 with staff. Story 33. I think as far as financial planning in real estate, there are significant tax breaks the average person does not know about. The 1031 exchange is not a secret. Many people are probably aware of it, but I bet only about 3% of readers have used it. The 1031 exchange allows you to sell real estate for a profit, and as long as you follow Internal Revenue Service 1031 guidelines, mainly reinvesting profit into another piece of real estate, you pay zero taxes on that particular sale. Another option is a cost segregation study. This is an effective tax strategy developed by legislators years ago. If you own a commercial real estate building and submit a cost segregation study, you can claim bonus depreciation. Depending on the size and worth of your asset, this allows you to depreciate hundreds of thousands of dollars over a short period, usually 1 to 7 years. This is significant because the normal depreciation schedule on commercial real estate is about 37 years. I have seen buildings valued around $2 million where owners achieve six-figure deductions per year for 5 years, directly reducing taxable income. I am not sure if investing or tax advantage examples were the original poster's intentions, so apologies if this is not relevant. Story 34. They never wait in line or deal with daily inconveniences like finding parking. They receive many complimentary items. Story 35. Fuss about with beach condominiums. When I started attending an upper-class church from a trailer park background, it was eye-opening. Story 36. I saw a wealthy man pay for a nice sailboat with $250,000 in cash. That sailboat was, in fact, farm equipment if anyone asks. Story 37. My mother-in-law has a massive dining table prominently shown in her dining room, with a beautiful indented copper surface. She absolutely refuses to let anyone touch it, much less eat on it or place anything on it. It is purely a design piece. Story 38. I was baffled when my friend's uncle took us to dinner before dropping us off at the airport. The waitress brought out water in glass cups, and he asked her to take them back and bring us glass bottles of water. Story 39. A good friend is very wealthy, with internet-based income. He anonymously donates his money to local nonprofit organizations. He volunteers at some of them. He specifically avoids national nonprofit organizations so he can see the local impact. He drives a 10-year-old Honda and lives in a small, old home in Seattle that is impeccably furnished and maintained. I would love to have his life. Story 40. When customers go shopping, they are taken to a back room with hors d'oeuvres and champagne, where a personal shopper selects items for them. It is essentially another store within the store that the public does not know about. Story 41. The old money group has a superficial social etiquette and banter. It is remarkable how their wit and ability to hold conversations without substance come from an upbringing involving country clubs, balls, galas, and fundraisers. Often, their dialogue resembles scenes from a television show. Story 42. Concern about safety when not at secure property. Looks out of the vehicle while parking with much more interest than I would. If in public, may wear a mask or hat and have hands in pockets with pepper spray or have a bodyguard very close by. Is the door locked? I just started getting Amazon and groceries delivered. They either have employees pick it up or have it delivered. Combination of not wanting to be with all those common people or not feeling safe outside. Story 43. Not really having a job. They seem to do things that appear to be a job, but they can and will drop them whenever they want to do something else. I am guessing that there is actually someone they are paying who truly does the job, and they just occasionally play at doing the job. Story 44. 1. Some have employees who live full-time on their yacht. Others have staff who work on-site on their estates, including maintenance, kitchen, and housekeeping. Wealthy individuals receive many free items, including things you might never consider, such as free vacations and other high-priced luxuries. They have bath mats and shower mats, and they are actually different. Some have bedrooms larger than houses, and guest houses larger than any middle-class home. The wealthiest can influence the global economy with a single business decision, like those made by Starbucks and Amazon. Story 45. The private non-application country club scene is wild. I got a glimpse through a friend. A couple was discussing the merits of which of their private jets to use for the wife's girl's trip, choosing from the few they owned. It was like talking about buying a throw pillow. Story 46. Pay someone to manipulate, cover up, or hide the information they do not want the average person to know about them. Story 47. When I dated a very wealthy man, one of the things I found interesting was that we did not need reservations anywhere. All of the most exclusive restaurants knew him and his family. He would decide where to go, call ahead, and tell them we were on the way. These fancy, fully booked places would not only have a great table ready, but the owner would be out front waiting to welcome us as we stepped out of the car. Another thing that the average person might not realize is that he noticed if things were expensive. This was back when we had movies on video. Someone borrowed one from him and had not returned it. I remember him saying with annoyance, "They are kind of expensive." Story 48. The father-in-law of a relative used to have a restaurant in a remote location. There was no menu and no prices, just one large table. Occasionally, people would book ahead and fly in by helicopter. He would cook what he wanted, as it was not open every day. There was likely some discussion about the type of food, but the details were up to him, and everyone had the same meal, creating a family dining experience. He cooked for us once, and it was truly incredible. He was a very relaxed person with an impressive past, having held several important and powerful positions. Story 49. Get a certified public accountant. I am not rich by any means, but I have rental properties. There is so much complicated paperwork that I do not trust doing it myself. Story 50. My ex-boyfriend was wealthy. He bought several buildings in Brooklyn, specifically in Sunset Park and Chinatown, decades ago that are now worth millions. He conducted many transactions in cash, as did many of his Chinese buyers. One thing he told me that amazed me is that people who deal in cash bring it to their real estate closings. They might carry a briefcase full of $5 million in cash, which is counted at the closing table. They are accompanied to the closing by armed security. When my ex-boyfriend had a closing, some of his friends in the New York Police Department would accompany him. I am a commercial real estate paralegal who has closed numerous multimillion-dollar deals and had never heard of this. Story 51. They spend a lot of time managing their material possessions, and the knowledge that if there is a better version of something out there, they could have it keeps them awake at night. I briefly dated a man who invented a better way to powder dehydrated vegetables and sold it for $55 million. He flew me to his winter home in Florida after we met on a dating app. He had a sailboat, a custom-modified Sprinter van, a Tesla for both his winter and summer homes, all the kiteboarding gear, a pool, and more. But the amount of anxiety, tinkering, researching, and general stuff management was overwhelming. Would the fittings on the sailboat be better in brass than chrome? The Tesla was taking too long to be delivered. Did he get the right modifications on the Sprinter? Maybe he should have installed a second bunk. Now he had to find the best Sprinter bunk specialist, who turned out to be in Utah. The storage for the stand-up paddleboards could be replaced by a slightly better version. The boat might get stolen, so now he needed an anti-theft device. He was never finished getting everything just right. He never would be. It was exhausting. Story 52. I made friends with a man who was the captain of one of the yachts owned by a Russian oligarch. He told me about how they have support yachts for the main yachts. The support yachts sail ahead to a destination, prepare the island, clean up locations after the main client has left, resupply the main yacht, bring tenders such as extra jet skis to the location, and more. I knew people had yachts. I did not know people had yachts for their yachts. Story 53. Private airport transfers. A luxury car picks you up whenever you are going to the airport. Provided by the airline, it takes you to a separate check-in and security checkpoint. Once you have done it a couple of times, you cannot go back. Story 54. Stiff employees, tradespeople, and business associates are not afraid of the consequences of not paying non-institutional creditors. They know that going to court is a hassle for smaller creditors who will accept lower payments to avoid it. At a higher level, they understand that institutional creditors will accept partial or delayed payments. They view human interaction as a game with few rules and are less burdened by social norms. Story 55. The wealthy use experts to make informed decisions, not the internet or friends. They do not mind paying an accountant or attorney for advice. Story 56. They use their money to buy time. Hairdressers and doctors visit their home. They hire help for routine tasks to free up time for more important matters. Nothing is do-it-yourself. Story 57. I worked in disaster response after Hurricane Dorian hit the Bahamas. A millionaire let us borrow his mansion on Paradise Island in Nassau while his family stayed in their other mansion in Italy. Story 58. Swapping cars is a big decision. Thinking, oh, this is a 2023 model and has 30,000 miles on it. I have to trade it in. Story 59. One thing that has been interesting to me as my partner and I have become increasingly financially fortunate is that there are companies that disassemble and clean your grill. The expectation is to do it twice yearly. You generally pay around $1,200 per service, and a technician comes to your house and works for 6 to 8 hours to get it all spotless. Admittedly, we went for it the first year we were in our house, and then we asked ourselves, what are we doing? Now we use what I call the cremation setting, turning everything inside to ash, then put in some elbow grease to scrub off the ash. It is not as clean as the technician can do, but it also takes us almost no time and is clean enough. Story 60. Private travel clubs blend their clients into areas as normal people or travel groups, while surrounding them with security and providing the most exclusive access to everything. The tour bus they arrive in might look generic, but it has run-flat tires, bulletproof glass, armed security on board, and a security vehicle trailing. Story 61. Purchase kidnap and ransom insurance. This insurance provides coverage in the event of a kidnapping. Story 62. I worked for a very wealthy man once. He was odd and somewhat nerdy. He often mentioned how he had hiked the Grand Canyon as if it were a great accomplishment. You could tell he was very proud of it. However, it turned out he had people with him who did everything for him, setting up tents, carrying supplies, and so on. The real surprise was that a helicopter delivered meals from 5-star restaurants every night. The way wealthy people hike is not the same as how average people hike. Story 63. I knew a guy right after high school who came from a wealthy family. Looking at him and talking to him, you would never know he came from money. He was really trashy, dirty, and what we would call a wannabe back then. He would randomly show up to parties or hang out selling drugs and then casually ask if anyone wanted to go to the small regional airport nearby and fly in his father's plane. I personally never went, but I had friends who did. They said they would get into this small plane, where a pilot was waiting for him to tell them where to go. They would take off and perform crazy maneuvers in the air, like extreme angle dives, to feel weightless. It was pretty dangerous over the city and ridiculous for a joyride. I can't imagine how much it cost him and his father. Story 64. They think of flying to Italy just to eat the pasta they crave in a restaurant, as if they are taking a trip to a convenience store at midnight because they are hungry. Story 65. I know the son of a hedge fund owner who takes a private jet for the day with his friends to play golf in other states, and then flies back in time for dinner. Story 66. Buy a cheap fixer-upper house as a starter home, and live in it while their children are between 1 and 5 years old. Later, buy a large mansion. I have had many clients who I did not know were wealthy upgrade to an extremely expensive house in what seemed like a spur-of-the-moment decision. Story 67. I worked for a billionaire, and the tax loopholes are absurd. He timeshared a private jet, and when he used it, he invited people because he could claim it as a business expense if there were a certain number of people on board. Story 68. I worked at a private aviation firm in college. It was the home base of Victoria's Secret and Express owner Les Wexner. He had a Boeing business jet and 2 Global Express aircraft. One day, he was arriving back from a trip to Israel. His pearl black Rolls-Royce Phantom was waiting on the tarmac. As it pulled slightly closer to the plane, it hit something on the apron and blew a tire. About 45 seconds later, an identical pearl black Rolls-Royce Phantom appeared around the corner. Apparently, when you are worth over $6 billion, having a backup $450,000 car just in case is a real thing. Story 69. Use plumbing with hot and cold water on tap at any time. Also, have refrigerators and closets. This is in the top 25th percentile worldwide. Story 70. On my bachelor trip in Austin, I got separated from my friends. It was 2 a.m. I grabbed a slice before heading back to the house and ended up meeting 3 guys while watching a brawl in the middle of the street. I felt bad being alone, and they took me to an after-party. We pulled up to a closed-down Italian restaurant, went through a space, and opened a door to a massive party in the back of the house. All the alcohol was served in water bottles. Everyone there was wearing high-end designer clothes. It was a great night. Story 71. Many wealthy people are very active swingers. I am not wealthy. I come from a low-income background, and I am doing okay. However, I work for wealthy individuals. The image they present for political reasons as being wealthy is inherently political, another aspect the average person does not understand, is completely different from who they actually are. Story 72. Write off virtually everything as a business expense. Set up scholarship charities that only their own children ever receive, making college costs a charitable deduction. Donate unwanted items to Goodwill or other charities. Then claim a high value on the receipts that Goodwill allows you to complete yourself. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.